Good morning and welcome again. Our Peach Blow celebration seems to be growing each week, and I appreciate that. And I thank Keith and Cheryl for all they're doing on this, and Emily is certainly helpful at my end. Remind you, if you're interested in our Bible study slash discussion group, it'll be on Wednesday at 3 o'clock. We'll end up the lesson that I think I bored some folks with, but I still want to finish it up. And then we're going to talk about some things that are important for us to believe. Sky will be singing for us in a little while. And again, we certainly appreciate the music that Sky via Stony Brook United Methodist Church helps us with. I'm going to take a little time off of worship and give you some things that have been happening this week related to the bishop telling us stuff, the cabinet, some pastors that I've spoken to. None of this is written in concrete for us, but I just thought some of you might want to know a little more what's going on. First of all, the Zoom ministry is really become popular. And I appreciate that folks from our church got on that in the very beginning. The best evaluation is that when you have a meeting or a study or a worship service, and you'll like this, it should average between 20 to 30 minutes, but not more. That doesn't bother me at all, but that's one thing that they have found is important. In terms of going back to the church building, pastors have been advised, don't be in a hurry. Don't do it till you get some information, not only from the government, but from our United Methodist Church. And I will honor that. I don't want to hurry us back into a situation where we wish we would have waited another week or two. They will discourage when we do get back into the building of having baptisms or communion where we use any kind of bread or juice. It'll be a while till we probably are given permission to use those kinds of things. They've also expressed when we get back into our building not to have any food before or after the worship service. The cabinet believes that probably one of the most effective things in terms of people feeling still part of the church is, number one, the Zoom experience that we have, and the other one really pleased me because I'm an old-fashioned. They said nothing was appreciated any more than telephone calling, personal telephone calling. Well, that's all my commercials, and I thought that might help some of you. I have no idea when we're going to be back in the church building. I still think it'll be somewhere between the end of May and somewhere around Father's Day in June. But in the meantime, gosh, it's good to see so many of you being part of this experience. Our call to worship is from Psalm 85, and I'm just going to read a few verses of that. Faithfulness will spring up from the ground, and righteousness will look down from the sky. Yes, the Lord will give what is good, and our land will yield its increase. Righteousness will go before him and make his footsteps the way. My theme today is a little bit about forgiveness, so let me have a little prayer about forgiveness. Merciful God, whose nature is to forgive, enable each of us to have a second chance to come alive. Fill us with that same spirit of love that we may amend broken relationships with others through your healing ministry of forgiveness. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. I'm going to read a scripture lesson, pick out some verses from Luke 22. I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, but this is Luke 22, and it has to do with the experience of the Lord's Supper and the preparation of that supper. So Jesus sent Peter and John, saying, "Go and prepare the Passover for us, that we may eat it." They said to him, "Where will you have us prepare it?" He said to them, "Behold, when you have entered the city, a man carrying a jar of water will meet you and follow into the house which he enters. And tell the householder, the teacher says to you, where is the guest room where I am to eat the Passover with my disciples? And he will show you a large upper room furnished. There make ready." And they went and found it as he had told them, and they prepared the Passover. I'm going to talk about that in just a few moments, but I guess I'm in sort of a prayerful mood today. Let me have a prayer, and then I'm going to ask that Cheryl will play one of our music, one of the hymns. Let me have another prayer. Gracious and loving Creator, you have given us the truth which is not mere facts, but is wrapped up in a personality. You have given us a life, for you have given to it value. And you have shown us the capacity for the eternal, which we want to share with you. Help us to make straight your way, for we stumble and frankly, we fall without you. We pray for your blessing be upon our loved ones and upon those that may be sort of difficult to love. For all these things, we ask that you will watch over us in the name of our Lord and our Savior. Amen. Cheryl, if you'll play that for us. I'm going to talk a little bit today about some of the traditions that we have in our church, and some of them relate to being events. Let's see, things like baptisms, weddings, the Lord's Supper, lots of different things. And they're going to probably change a little till we can get back in our building. Weddings are always fun to be part of. Sometimes they get a little more detailed than I like, but you can always, after about 4 or 5 weddings, you can always come up with a funny story. I remember one wedding where it was a large wedding, and it was in Westerville. And I was explaining at the end of the service the unity candle. You know, in the 70s and the 80s, the unity candle was a big thing. And at the end of the service, there are 3 candles, and you instruct the bride and the groom to each take their candle, and then to light the center candle. And then you say to them and to the congregation, now you will live as one, you know, the expression of taking, and you have now one light. And then normally the bride and groom would have a kiss and I'd introduce them. But before they could even have a kiss, um, the groom looked at the bride and the bride said, "You understand that? That means no more flames." And everybody laughed and there was a kiss and I introduced them. Weddings are certainly interesting. It's difficult now if you, in the newspapers where someone may have a funeral service or memorial service, and it's very difficult for a family right these days to have a group together. So there's a lot of postponing of memorial services and funeral services. Communion is something that is going to take a different shape, as I inferred it a little earlier to you. The communion service that I probably remember as much as any, I was at my first church about a month, and I'm an associate there, by the way. I'm the low man on the totem pole. And the fellow was a senior pastor, had been there 28 or 29 years, I don't even remember, and he retired. So the congregation was heartsick. And then the other associate, this was his last Sunday, and he was serving communion. He was going on to take a position at a university, and I was to be there by myself for a year while they looked for their own pastor. It was a very, very large church. So when we did communion, we probably had 10 to 12 trays piled up 5 or 6 at a time. He got through sharing of the bread and reminding them of Jesus' life. And then when he turned around to, and this is not meant to be funny, but it is in some ways, when he turned around to pick up the first load of trays, 5 or 6 of them, he stumbled and knocked them all over. The whole bit went down. The table fell over. And like a professional, he stopped for a moment. He looked over at the organist and he winked at Mrs. Dare, had no idea what the communication was. And then he says, "Truly, the blood of the Lord has been shed for thee this day." He was a marvelous, talented man. Somehow between the two of them, he was wonderful when he sang the Lord's Prayer. And he immediately, as she began, he sang the Lord's Prayer. It was a way of sort of bringing together that communion service with even the accident was there. It was so moving. I was just a young fellow, 23 or 24. As he finished the Lord's Prayer, everyone in the congregation, and I'm sure there were 500 or 600 people there, they stood up and they clapped. It was truly a celebration that looked for a while like, well, how are we possibly going to end this service with what happened at the communion table? Now, let me conclude and tell you a little bit more about that scripture lesson that I read to you from Luke this morning. There's 2 of them that are very much alike, Luke and John. Now, all 4 of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they tell about the Lord's Supper. But John is very different than any other. John has also feet washing. That's where the Church of the Brethren gets their text for having that as a special kind of covenant that they have in their church. Today, some of the so-called forgiveness is like the dry chalkboard eraser that my 2nd grade teacher, Miss Smith, taught me about many years ago. She'd often tell me to clean off the chalkboard, and she'd go on and do something outside the room, and I'd come back and she'd say, "Is it done?" And I'd say, "Yes." But the next day when she'd begin to write something on the board, you could see the writing come through, and she'd look at me and she'd say, "Joel, you didn't take wet cloths and really wipe off the chalkboard in the way I wanted you to do that." Grudges can be that way. They should be forgotten, but we all know that sometimes we carry grudges. We really need to get rid of them. There are only 2 ways you can get rid of them. You can get rid of them in your own personal life, or you can take it with you to your grave. Oh, sure, you could maybe write it on your tombstone, but it probably would be laughter for people looking at your tombstone. It's hard for some of us to get rid of certain grudges. Remember, a grudge cannot last forever. So why carry it with you every day? Forgiveness is just the opposite. It is genuine, it is real, and it's something that can last forever and ever. To really let another person off the hook, and we all need to do this with ourselves and with others, we need to work on that kind of relationship. We need to let them off the hook completely, folks. That means no barbed jokes years later, no verbal jabs, no reminders wherever it might be, but we have to put it out of our mind. If we refuse to let the memory of the past invade the present, we can have some difficulty. We need to let go and to forgive. Only God can give that kind of forgiveness. I know it sounds a little like dreaming. I'm still working on one element of grudge and forgiveness. It goes way back to a teacher, a coach in high school. I'm working on it, and I often ask God to help me to forget and to forgive. Jesus ate with some sinners. He extended to them forgiveness. He dipped the bread at the Last Supper with the man who would betray him, literally betray him, but he still gave him an opportunity. And he still loved Peter in spite of the fact, Peter, who was going to be the great church leader of the organized church, well, Peter 3 times denied that he even knew him. He prayed for them. He prayed for the person, literally, who crucified him. When God forgives, my brothers and sisters, he forgives forever. Let us try to put that kind of forgiveness into our practice with someone that we know. I'm working on it. I'd like you to work on it. Someone that really needs to have that chance to be forgiven by us. Our relationship certainly can have more quality and more divineness in it. The Lord Jesus Christ did give his body for thee and preserve thy soul into everlasting life. The blood of Christ has also been given to us. He shed his blood for us that we might know complete forgiveness. Lord, forgive us of our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. Amen. Cheryl, I think we're ready for our second music.
Familiar, we find security.
Press on toward the mark of your high calling in Jesus Christ. Forget what lies behind. Move on to make him your very own. Practice forgiveness in your life. Share it with those that you love and those that need your forgiveness. Amen. Thank you so much for being part of our worship experience, our celebration. Wow. I'd like to encourage any of you want to stay on the line to say hi to each other. Some of you need to move on and do what you want to. That's just fine. But I do appreciate, this is marvelous for the size of our church. And we welcome a couple of you that are new to the program and a couple of you that came in just as I was starting. So